Hey everyone, welcome back to By Its Cover. I'm Leah, and today we are doing a book talk comparing Caraval to the Night Circus. So I read these two books back to back, which I think made it pretty easy to see the similarities and differences between the two. And I just felt like having a discussion, putting some of them out, because my book club read The Night Circus and we had a pretty good in-depth discussion about everything in this, but I'm the only one who's read Caraval, and I enjoyed this one better personally, but that's just because of my taste. I'm going to talk about pros and cons in the differences between the two books and why certain things work for one and not for the other. I'm going to start with similarities. These are going to be pretty spoiler-free. They're pretty much what you'd pick up from the summary and just basic context about each setting. When we get into differences, I'll throw up a spoiler warning because that will be pretty spoiler heavy. So first up, similarities, stating the pretty obvious that both of these are kind of carnivals, night circuses, things that are magic and special and people seek out for fun and adventure. I think the biggest similarity for me that freaked me out the most is that the Night Circus is called the Circus of Dreams and Caraval is set on the Island of Dreams. So that was a pretty freaky coincidence. Both places are only opening at night for guests and are owned by mysterious men who are constantly trying to hide their identity. You have Mr. A.H. who redacts his last name from every mention in the book. He physically tries to wipe his presence from people's memories if they interact with him at all. He just kind of watches the circus from afar, but doesn't run it like a ringleader or anything. And then you have a legend who no one knows the true face of because he appears as a different person during every Caraval, if he appears to you at all. Or you could be speaking to him and not even know who he is because literally no one knows his face. Both books contain a female lead that is actually abused by her father figure, which I thought was another strong, weird similarity to share, but also very intriguing and a good setup. I haven't seen many portrayals in fantasy books, at least, of abused women, especially daughters, so it was kind of nice. Going off of that, both of them had boys that were in love with them, and they both shared the similarity of being super overprotective of the girls, but in the creepy distancing way and not telling them what they're doing, and thinks that they can solve problems by ghosting them and that the distance will keep the girls safer. And that was my biggest annoyance in both books, but what are you gonna do? Okay, so we're getting into the difference now, so spoiler warning if you have not read either of these, get out right now. Bye! Okay, I've laid this out in points where talking about the differences of a certain subject and then whether it is a pro or a con for that story. So Caraval is super high action paced. The whole story takes place over probably about 10 days, of which 2 our main character is unconscious, so really it's only 8 for the reader. Super quick, super actiony. They barely sleep. I always worry about characters who don't sleep, like, how are you doing? Are you okay? But that worked in favor of the book for me. I thrive off high action pace. I like when something's always happening. I don't care for the boring bits, so this was definitely my speed. Night Circus is a much slower timeline. It takes place over years, and they have to be dated at the top of each chapter, but it's so that we can see the childhood of the 2 main characters, then we can see the main plot of the story, and then there's also an epilogue that takes place a good 90 years after we last see the characters. So yeah, it also jumps the timeline out of order with flash forwards to the future and then back to the past, and there's a point where they meet in the middle and the climax happens. And that was interesting, but the whole years pace was not really for me, in that there were definitely years where nothing happened and they could have been cut. Both carnivals are a game of some sorts, but the huge difference lies in who the game is for. The Night Circus is for two magicians who are waged against each other by their fathers in like a chess duel, and it's just between them, and everyone else there is kind of an obstacle or a challenge, or just there to observe and have fun. Caraval, on the other hand, is like a game for all the guests. It's a challenge, it's a scavenger hunt, it's a little bit Hunger Gamesy because people will go a little crazy in there. They like to pretend that there's no consequences to their action here, that they're a different person, that none of this is going to follow them back into their real life, but really it would. I don't see either one of those setups as being better than the other. They're both very distinct and interesting, and it's probably the biggest differentiating factor in these books that make them so unique. So about those games, basically, from the point of view of the two players in the Night Circus, they are never really told the rules of their game. They're just kind of making it up and figuring stuff out as they go along, and the more they find out, the more they realize they don't want to be a part of it. And I like mysteries, so this kind of slow discovery was good with the timeline of this book, but I definitely figured out some things before the characters, and that's when I think I got bored and was like, come on, why don't you know this yet? Caraval is kind of like a giant trick on the eye. They have a disclaimer when you walk in that nothing you see is real, but I'm pretty sure it's a good blend of real and imaginary. So there's a constant distrust of everyone that you meet, and also your own senses. You can't believe if what you're seeing is true, what you're smelling is true, what you're hearing is true. It's insane. And that was probably my only downside of Caraval, because it made the plot exciting, but it made me distrust everything and everyone that she interacted with and met, and I was like, maybe that's not real, maybe that's not real, did this actually happen, like what? And it's insane, but there gets to be a point where you're like, okay, another twist because what she saw wasn't real. Alright, I guess. And it's just a lot. Getting into the romance of these books. The romance in the Night Circus was supposed to be kind of the saving grace of our main characters. They form this special bond as children before they even meet and spend their whole lives trying to find each other. And they do, and they don't really act on it all that much. They just kind of like let it stew inside them from a distance and keep building presents for each other. So just the idea that the connection made the romance, and if that connection wasn't there, they wouldn't have fallen in love, kind of ruins it for you. And I wasn't crazy about them as a couple. I was totally about Bailey and Poppet though. Caraval, however, is a enemies to lovers story, which I always fall for. It always gets me every time. I'm like, no, I'm not gonna like this boy, and then guess what? I do. I thought the ending was a little bit awkward, but I'm pretty sure there's supposed to be a sequel, and I hope it will explore their relationship a little more and clear up that awkwardness. Now about the endings of these books. The Night Circus leads up to this huge climax where a sacrifice is ultimately made by Celia and Marco, but because I didn't really care for their star-crossed lover story, I didn't really care that they were sacrificing themselves to be together, because like, yeah, of course you would. I think it would have been much more impactful if they actually died, and true Romeo and Juliet fashion would have been way more exciting. Caraval, however, is literally all a giant game. I think you really have to take the tagline to heart when you read this book. Remember, it's only a game. The whole thing is a setup. There is a fake death that leads to freedom for these sisters, and I think that was great. That was a great twist. It was my favorite in the book. Now, the epilogues for these are very, very different. Caraval's takes place probably minutes after the story ends, and is fine, but then it sets up a nice cliffhanger for a sequel, which got me super intrigued, so now I'm waiting. Throughout the Night Circus, you're reading these bits of narrative that don't have a point of view. It kind of sounds like it's your own, and in the epilogue we find that it is set in modern day times, and I think that was a cool little, just like a nice, hey, we're still around, we're still kicking, we're still doing the circus, and I was like, cool, yeah, good for you. But I'm not expecting a sequel out of it. It doesn't set up for anything super exciting or fun. It's just over and it was like, thanks. Okay, that is it for my comparison. Oh, that took us such a long time. If you agree with anything I said, if you disagree, please let me know down in the comments. I'd love to have a discussion about it. Thanks so much for watching. Hit like and subscribe down below if you haven't already. And I will see you all in the next chapter.